Yes, hello folks, welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host as always, Phil Brandt, joined with my regular co-host here, excellent James Rhodes from United Muppetiers, episode 4 in our podcast series. So thanks to all of you for downloading the previous episodes, much appreciated. Lots to talk about in today's podcast. Of course, we will take a quick look back at the Burnley game since that happened since the last time we recorded, and of course the Crystal Palace game. We'll also take a look at some of the news and gossip that's going on inside United, the takeover, Antony returning, the latest with Jadon Sancho at Newcastle at home. We'll get your views on that. Of course, 12th home draw in a row in the FA Cup, in the Carabao Cup, and then of course we will preview the Crystal Palace game coming up at the weekend. So first of all, how you doing, mate?
Good. How are you?
Certainly a lot better than when we previously recorded.
This time, right?
two back-to-back wins.
I know, it's kind of the first time we've been able to do this on the back of something positive, isn't it?
Despite the fact we've had 2 back-to-back wins and clean sheets, I've still seen some negativity. I actually had someone tweet me. It's truly unbelievable. This was before the Burnley game. I was saying, how I was hoping they would win, and his response to me was, "Why? It'll just mean we become deluded about how good we are." I'm like,
very strange, isn't it?
Why? Should we just lose every game, man? I really, there's lots of people out there where every silver lining has a cloud, and it's just that mentality. But I was feeling really good about United after the Crystal Palace game. But we'll quickly look at the Burnley game. I know it's quite far now in our rearview mirror since it's happened, but nonetheless, we'll quickly talk about it. There's a couple of things I wanted to pick up in that game that were relevant, I believe, and we saw some of that in Tuesday's game against Crystal Palace. United win the game 1-0. Thought Johnny Evans, of course, was exceptional in that game. But one of the things that I heard after the game, James, was it was only Burnley, United played poorly, all this, blah, blah, blah. And what I don't understand is why people think United are going to break a bad run of form by going out and beating somebody 5-6-0. You're going to break a bad run of form doing exactly what they did against Burnley. You keep a clean sheet, you grind out a win. It's not going to be pretty. There's an old saying, when a striker goes on a drought, you just need one to go off your backside and then they'll go. It's the same thing, right? This is how you break. I know United have had 2 single goal victories and they didn't follow that up. But this was different. It was away from home. Their away record's poor. They kept the clean sheet. They needed to win this game. And I actually think that the third goal against Bayern, insignificant in terms of the result, but maybe significant in terms of psychology, that helped United go into that Burnley game thinking 4-3 isn't as bad as 4-2. 4-3 is not a disgrace. And I think I thought they played well against Burnley, despite Burnley dominating the ball.
Yeah, well, we talked about the Bayern thing last week, and there was kind of a couple of perspectives on that, because on the one hand, sure, the 4-3 is probably flattering in terms of the performance. However, he commented that it was positive that they didn't roll over 7-0, which has obviously happened, or 6-1 or something like that, right? That's happened. Even just fighting back to get those goals, you could feel that by the end of the game, they weren't hopeless. They weren't defeated. You may not like, some people definitely wouldn't have liked Bruno Fernandes' comments that going into Germany and scoring 3 goals was good. I know people weren't happy with it because they lost the game, those kind of comments. But I think the point and fact of it was it's better to walk away from the game thinking we fought to score goals and we can. Because the self-belief is the big thing we've seen missing. We've been talking about that all season. They don't look like they believe in themselves to win anymore. And that is a hard thing to shake. And against Burnley with what was almost an incredible lineup to be having to field out there with all the injuries and all that, to walk in and put in, it doesn't matter how good the performance was. They deserved the win. They grinded it out. You wouldn't really expect to see Johnny Evans and Victor Lindelof being your center back pairing in 2023 at Manchester United, but they did. And of course, Evans is the one who ends up with the assist to Bruno Fernandes for an amazing goal. Bruno Fernandes, of course, who made the comments with the confidence on scoring those goals against Bayern. These things do tie together, and they
sure
mean
do.
something. They do, and that self-belief going in there that they could get a result, that they could score a goal, that they could grind out a win, and doing so was different, as you say, to Wolves, where they shouldn't have won that game at all. It was terrible on many fronts. It was one they lucked into a win, in many ways, and so it was. I think it was really positive. That's the type of game you would see. I mean, people forget Sir Alex having some big defeats and following up with some very grindy wins that were not always flashy. They were not always fireworks. Some of them were really like that, especially when, following bad defeats and things like that.
Well, I keep hearing it's the most competitive league in the world until United win a game, and then the opposition shit.
And then everybody sucks, right?
Too. It's amazing how shit opposition comes as soon as United beat them. Look, it was a good 1-0 away win, and it was really important they won that game because, of course, they have a run of fixtures where they need to build momentum. It wasn't just the fact that they wanted to keep the clean sheet, which was really, really important. Prior to that, they conceded 14 goals, which is a lot. I had question marks being asked about the defense. But I think, when we're talking about the lineup, and some people are saying Johnny Evans starting, we need to remind ourselves why. This isn't because United don't have sufficient strength. This isn't because United didn't buy appropriate players. This is because they're going through an unbelievable injury crisis that would affect anybody, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you take out someone's top 4 centre backs, and at any Premier League club
and fullbacks. I mean,
and you're going to get down to players that you don't expect to be playing.
Yeah.
I mean, no one's back four is going to look great if you take out their top, both their left backs, their starting left back, a backup left back, the 4 centre backs all out. I mean, you're going to get down to bare bones. I think, to be honest, I think Victor Lindelof's a really, really good backup defender, and I thought Johnny Evans showed not just quality, but I think he shows an attitude that was once at United that's long since gone. It was interesting hearing him talk after the game about the things that he's learning from Ten Hag about being ahead of the ball as a defender, which is something that, of course, they never did. When Ferguson was there, and so of course, they also have to learn how to play under Ten Hag. But I thought, he played really well. The other thing that needs to be taken from the game, for me, James, was another controversial VAR decision. 4th game in a row. Now, there's lots of people going to say Rasmus Højlund's offside. I mean, maybe he is. I don't know. Probably is. But I'm looking at City getting that goal. And it went in their favour. By the way, City got that goal against Fulham at a key moment. Okay?
Yeah, I know.
So they needed... Yeah, so that was a game-changing decision.
Yeah.
So...
To the point where Haaland commented on it in the press and said he'd be upset about it too, that it was a game-changing call and all of that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So they get those breaks, right? And I'm going to say that the penalty that wasn't given against Wolves got more coverage in all the controversial VAR decisions that went against United combined. Right? And then we have Dermot Gallagher on TV explaining why Arsenal got a penalty against Spurs against Christian Romero. Well, he didn't actually explain it. He was asked to answer the question, what's the difference? And he couldn't explain the difference. He ended up just putting some word salad nonsense together, and which confirmed to me that he doesn't know what the difference is. And I don't know what the difference is. Nobody knows what the difference is. Right? And again, this was a key moment in the game when that penalty is not given. A big moment, right? In a big away game. Arsenal get that decision at a key moment. United don't get that decision. And I know everyone feels like the referees are biased against their own team, but it's really, really difficult to defend those decisions that are big decisions that don't go your way but go other teams' way.
Yeah, and there's no way that there's been more goals chalked off for anybody else this year than United at this point in time by VAR. On top of that, right? I mean, we had a string, right, 3-4 games in a row of a goal being marked off on possibly debatable. Possibly, and not even that clear cut on any of them. on any of them. Was it not that
Yeah.
clear cut? And all of them game changers. All of them, every single one of them game changers.
Well, I
Every
can
single
think
one
of
of them.
moments where those decisions have gone for, like, I mean, we think about Liverpool last season when I think it was Mo Salah, the ball was out by Amad, and they said, oh, we didn't have the VAR angle to look at it, so it goes to Liverpool's favor, they get that. I can think of every single moment we United have been disallowed a goal where it went in United's rivals' favor, where they've been given the benefit of the doubt.
Yep, I know, and it is, there is something to it. There is very clearly, because it's not even just the VAR at times. A lot of times it comes down to the basic fouls that are being called, the basic, ticky-tacky type of calls against United for playing physical that other teams get away with. The yellow cards, I'll give you an example, which we can talk about Hannibal a little bit more in a minute, but Hannibal Mejbri got a yellow extremely early in the Palace game for his first tackle. He told the referee, "This is my first tackle. That was my first foul."
Dallo too against Burnley.
Got a slight clip of the heels, and it worked out. He lasted the game. He kept in touch with the referee. Why did he get a yellow for his first tackle?
Well, especially whenever I saw about 5 minutes after that, a worse tackle by Crystal Palace. I can't remember who it was.
And I remember what you're talking about.
The referee and said, "Why are you not giving a yellow card here?" Which is entirely asked.
Yeah, I know, and it comes down to that, because those are game-changing things. We had instances in some of those games. I think Wan-Bissaka ended up on a yellow real early for one tackle. It's happened a lot, and those are the things that change games, because it changes how players have to play. It changes their aggression. It changes their confidence. It changes everything, and it is becoming almost to a point where it feels rather obvious that it's almost like a point of emphasis. Make sure you're not favoring United, which ends up going the other way, of course, and that's just how it seems.
If I was going to defend referees, what I would say is, I don't know if they consciously want to give decisions against United, but what they may be thinking about, do I really want to be all over TV for a week, having my reputation questioned, my integrity questioned? Do I really want, every ex-pro coming out? Do I really want Sky TV holding seances to ask Alf Ramsey what he thought of this penalty that wasn't given? How far do we want to go with this nonsense, right? I mean, they give more coverage to United's Wolves penalty than the Iraq war. Where are you going? This is absurd. Like, I mean, but the sense. The sense of betrayal, the sense that someone's been wronged when United get a decision, is goes right throughout the whole country. But what I was listening to the Guardian podcast a week or two ago, and I was listening to a journalist on there when they were talking about United not getting decisions. And I give her credit for this, because at least she was honest. Well, I'm loving it. United ruined my childhood. I love seeing us win against them, do more of it. There's no question that's a significant part of fans and their satisfaction and the pleasure that they derive from United not getting decisions. And I have also said this also plays into the fact that they love the Glazers for this reason, because they've been an impediment to United's success. And so I think there's no question that's a significant part of the and look, what we have in the media, James, now is not about quality analysis. Is not about informants, but clicks, downloads, and so they play into it. They're not really interested in having balanced media or having informed decisions or having informed debate or having informed analysis. They just want clicks, right? So they'll amplify anything, if they feel like it provokes the correct response in a sufficient outrage. So other positives against Palace you'd have to say Amrabat, of course, absolutely magnificent. Not just his attitude in, I'll play wherever you want me to, and he played exceptionally well. Showed a physicality United haven't had. And Burman, it's only his first start. Obviously Martial as well played really well. Casemiro was exceptional. The Casemiro that we've missed. So there was lots of other positives. Another clean sheet against, let's be honest, what is a good Premier League team?
Yeah, I mean, they're a solid team. They've been in the Premier League a long time now, consistently, Palace. And, everybody was rotating. Look at the team that we fielded. Amrabat having to play left back. Harry Maguire coming back in the side for the first time in a long time. Who did really well, 100 and 12 completed passes with like 91%, very solid. Rafael Varane coming in off injury, Mount coming in off injury. That's Martial, who's been way out of form. Two teenagers on the wings, and Garnacho and Pellistri, essentially. This is a team that, that if you want to call Crystal Palace bad, well, people have been calling all these players pretty bad on United for a while. So, obviously, they were better. And it's a really, really, really good win in that regard. For one, with the quality, but I think the biggest thing building on Burnley in that Palace game was the confidence and the certainty in which they played. There was no hesitancy from anybody. They had a plan and they stuck to it. And the attitude was there across the board from minute one. I don't think there was a player who started in that game that I would say didn't start it with confidence and attitude. There was not one I'd pick out. And usually even in wins, you can pick a player out that's like, they weren't really in it. There was nobody like that. Every single player I thought was in it from minute one. And that's a difference maker.
Yeah, no, agree. And I think, United controlled the game from start to finish. They didn't have moments in the game where, they start well and then they surrendered momentum.
Yep.
I thought they played really, really well for 90 minutes. I think there was a key moment in that game from Maguire. First 5 minutes, ball comes across the box, he clears it. If United concede, there may have been a whole different momentum, attitude shift, confidence, just, because it's still essentially a bit fragile, but he clears it. Read it very, very well. I really wanted him to have a good game, so I really wanted Maguire to play well. And
a lot of people wanted him to have a bad game.
I really wanted him to play well. There comes a point, and I know it's different for everyone else. Where you start to feel sorry for somebody, and there's a point where, look, I do feel sorry for him. It doesn't mean that I don't believe he should be above criticism, but I mean, it's hard not to feel sorry for him. But I think the other thing that it showed is how much that dressing room is behind Erik ten Hag.
Yep. Yeah, because you had some reports right before that, right? Which is just pretty typical about players questioning things like that. You had a lot of speculation about, who was pushing what, and players disagreeing with, the decisions that are being made, some of the stuff with Sancho, all of that. But when you get that much rotation and those players in there, and you see that belief from players like Harry Maguire, who are one of the most maligned at United, and had a lot of people questioning, if he's one of the people talking to media, things like that, it shows you quite a different story of what's presented out there. And, one of the things obviously is this happens with any top team in any sport in the world. When they're losing, it's very easy to write. Very, very easy to write anything you want about what's going on, what's happening there, what people are thinking, what people are saying, and everybody's going to lap it up. Winning solves everything. It's always been that way. You got to go out. When you go out and win, suddenly it gets quiet. And it is, we talked about that with Maguire too, is the best way to end the criticism for him is to go out and perform. That's what he has to do. He can't talk. You don't have, the words, the interviews, they don't do anything. You got to go out and perform. And that was the best way, I think, for the team to, as you say, show how behind the manager they are. It was to go out and perform from 1 to 90.
Yep. But I think in some sense, you probably could write stories that say some players have questioned certain things with Ten Hag, which is probably true, right? That doesn't mean they don't support him.
Exactly.
I don't think there's a dressing room anywhere in the country that doesn't have a few players in there that are pissed off. How could there not be? Right? That's just human nature. So when you're losing, that gives voice to the critics because it justifies their criticism and it makes it easy to legitimize. But when you're winning, it's very difficult to come out and criticize the manager and criticize the setup or criticize his methods when he's winning. This is why I said before, if you want to impose certain disciplinary structures, you have to do it from a position of strength. Otherwise, what's going to happen is the players that are disaffected, that are unhappy, they're going to, and make no mistake about it, there'll be players in United's dressing room that want United to lose to justify their sentiment towards Ten Hag and questioning all sorts of things. When you're asking players to do things they don't want to do, human beings in general, you have to, it's very difficult to do that when you're not getting results. right? Because it's easy for them to turn around and say, I don't want to do this, and I don't believe it's correct. But I think, which of course will bring us to the Jadon Sancho stuff as we, and it's some other news and stuff before we do that. I just want to make sure, is there anything else left on the Crystal Palace game that you want to single out?
No, I think the biggest thing I'd single out from Burnley and Crystal Palace is, in addition, would be touched on it, but Hannibal Mejbri's performance.
Yeah.
Obviously coming in and really making a mark. And it's the type of thing you hope to see every year at United, because we've had such a... I mean, where would we be if Marcus Rashford hadn't, under fortunate circumstances because of injuries, broke in under Louis van Gaal and scored a couple goals and has been a fixture in the side ever since and carried the team as essentially a superstar at times? Where would we be without that? Where would we be without Garnacho having broke in, in the last year and getting those chances? And Hannibal Mejbri looks to be somebody who, because of all these injuries, because of the difficulties we've been having, has got his chance and took it and grabbed it with both hands. He's a player who, don't forget, cost 10 million at 16 years old. This is the expectation of him, to become this type of player. He's probably one of the first academy players that I've followed from the minute he joined and tried to watch every game that he played on loan and all of that. And I just want to comment on it because there's a stat that, against Burnley, he ran more than any United player has run since they've been tracking the running stats, which is incredible. In his first start, I think he may have started a game at the end of the season a couple of years ago, but in his first real competitive fixture in the Premier League for United, to do that, he's averaging the most presses in the entire league per 90. He's putting the graft and the work in, but he's also following the plan. And that is really important. I think that is something that's real interesting, because Erik ten Hag has commented on in his pressers about following the plan. There's a moment when before Hannibal came off as a sub against Crystal Palace where he got the ball and it looked like maybe they could have a counter, but you could tell they were tiring a little as a team, giving up just a little more ground to Crystal Palace defensively. And instead of going up the field, he turns around and passes it backwards, recycles possession, keeps United in control. I think the fans actually almost groaned in the stadium at it, but it's the opposite of what the manager will feel in that moment. That he, in a moment where it would have been so easy for a player who has a talent for going forward, for creating, for wanting to do that, does the opposite, sticks with the plan. They were not playing on the counter against Crystal Palace. It was about control. It was about possession. It was about really owning the game from 1 to 90. And he stuck with the plan, recycled it, kept the ball. And I think that's the type of thing that spreads through the team when players start to do that. They stick with the plan. And sometimes it can come from interesting places, but those are the moments that will win players over with the manager and will get everybody on side for the plan. Because regardless of whether a plan is the best plan or not, it's better that everybody's on the same page than players are doing their own things. That's always going to be the case with any management team.
I said this before, that some people see playing for Manchester United as punishment, and some people see it as an opportunity. Many young players get their opportunity as a result of these types of things. Injuries, and all of a sudden you're being selected. This is why your attitude has to be bang on every single week, even when you're not playing, because you never know when that chance is going to come and you have to be ready to take it. So we also saw this with Palestri. Palestri, I'm sure, a week before the transfer window shuts, has no idea that Antony's going to get a leave of absence, and the Jadon Sancho situation is going to happen. All of a sudden, you're on the verge of first team place. Your attitude has to be right. You have to take that chance. You have to take it when it comes. And it really is perfect when it happens. So, I thought he has shown a tremendous attitude, even when he came on against Brighton. I remember when he came on against Liverpool 2022, we're getting battered, and he started throwing himself about. I was, okay, I like this kid. He's got the flair, but he's also got that little bit of bite to him. And in some sense, he has to control his aggression a little bit more, because he does get booked quite a bit. But I think the loan move to Birmingham has really helped him deal with the physicality. Listen, when he was here, was at the Wrexham game. One of the things that really stood out in that game was he got kicked all over the field. Every single time he got kicked, he stood up, give me the ball, give me the ball. It was very difficult to intimidate him because he stands out. He's got a lovely balance to him. He's technically very, very good. I thought some of his passing against Burnley, for example, was exceptional. But there's two other things that really stood out for me with him that was really interesting. There was a moment in Burnley where he tries to dribble the ball out on the edge of the box, loses possession, and Burnley almost score. Right? These are moments where it's a test of a kid's character. And you say, okay, now what are you going to do? Are you going to launch it, right? So you don't do that again? Or are you going to have the confidence to take the ball and do it again? And he was about 2 or 3 minutes later, has the confidence to start to take it again and not let it affect him. Right. So I think there's characteristically in terms of his personality, everything else, there's very, very encouraging signs that he is, someone that has tremendous potential. Again, almost went to Sevilla. I know Laurie Whitwell mentioned this on the Fantastic Talk of the Devils podcast, that he could have went on loan to Sevilla. There was other clubs that were interested in him. United decided to keep him. And looks like he's getting a new contract. And as Ten Hag said, you earn your opportunity. You don't get it because you think you deserve it. You have to earn it with him. And I think, that is exactly what young players need to understand. Garnacho, of course, also started the game, scored. And again, has shown a really, really positive attitude, despite the fact that maybe it's a bit unfair to be dropped because he wasn't the only one. The only thing that concerns me about Garnacho is it looks like his best position is on the left. So how's he getting that in the team?
I know that is a challenge, and it's hard because it is going to be challenging there as Rasmus Højlund gets more into form. The position's nailed down for Marcus Rashford. It just is, and it's going to be for the foreseeable future. He's the talisman of the team, new contract, all of that, right? And when he's on, you'd be hard pressed to find a winger better than Marcus Rashford. It's a tough position to be in. My hope is, again, that the situation ongoing provides a little bit of an opportunity. Garnacho is a young player. He's very talented. He's actually decent with both feet. United have at times looked better having someone on the right side who, instead of cutting in, will get to the line. That first goal was created. The first goal was created off a pass to Pellistri running down, knocks it into Dallow's path, making the run to the line and cutting it back to Garnacho. These are easy goals. Those are the goals you want to see that we do not make. But you only get those if you get somebody making that run. And so I'm hoping if Facundo Pellistri could play on that side, maybe Garnacho should be able to play there too and get some minutes. He's very talented. He's very fast. He would provide a different dynamic than Antony would. And given the unknowns on if we're going to have anybody in that right wing position till the end of the season, it's hopefully worth a shot there. I would like to see it. I would like to see him get a run in that position too, because I think he could offer something there.
I completely agree. So lots of positives to take from the Palace game. Let's moving on. We've got some news, gossip. We'll talk a little bit about Antony, of course. We'll talk a little bit about the Jadon Sancho situation and Ten Hag getting a new deal. Newcastle at home. The takeover. So we're a little bit of a bugbear on this. I don't like doing this, but I want to do it. Legacy media loathe independent broadcasters, podcasters, whatever. Right? One, it's a snobbery issue. Who are you? You're not journalists. You're not, part of our club. You didn't go to college and do this, university, whatever. So, two, you don't work for a major broadcaster, publisher, whatever. So you're a nobody. Three, it's not a story until we tell it. Right? I don't care whether you told it weeks ago. It's not a story until I tell it. So there's a bit of hubris there. We'll be the ultimate arbiters of what is true and what's not. And four, it's not good for the business model or for their ego to acknowledge that independent broadcasters publish a story 2 weeks before. But if you're listening to this, my suggestion to you is subscribe to independent broadcasters like ourselves. Support independent broadcasters like ourselves. We aren't monetizing this content. They're getting paid for this. We aren't. And still we're bringing you this stuff weeks ahead of time. was a couple of stories that broke this week. One with Jadon Sancho, like, kicked out of the Old Trafford dressing room, which you broadcast on this podcast 2 weeks ago, I think it was.
Yep.
And then we talked a little bit about the takeover, where Bloomberg and David Hyler, who knows me, by the way, so you will have seen that we put that out there, that Jim Ratcliffe is found in his bed. We brought this to you first. We would like to get credit. We don't get credit, but that's part of the game, and it's disappointing that that's what they do, that there's some plagiarism from us. I'm not saying that, they even after they published the story, we told them that it was out there, so they could have made a correction. So they knew, maybe they missed that we put it out, possibly. I'd give them some benefit of doubt there, but they knew afterwards that the stuff that they put out there was not an exclusive, despite the fact that they claimed it was. Just a hot tip would be nice. By the way, some of these people, just a little caveat, have contacted me privately and asked me for information. So they are certainly people that are happy to use our information when they're using it in their own publications. So it would be nice if they would also acknowledge the fact that we put this stuff out there first. So why don't you go ahead and talk about that, James?
Yeah, I mean, it's to some degree, a big problem. Like, one of the things that we've spoken about is that, we're reporting on football transfers and things like that, right? Inside information on a football club, on a sport. It's not the type of thing that has a standard like other reporting would need to or require. It's not going to garner the same criticism. It's not going to get the same thing, but it's also interesting in that it's also become almost a competition of its own, right? Football reporting, it's a constant competition. I rarely see in other areas of media people competing. I know they do. I know that networks in general compete for views and stories and get the exclusives on things like that. But you don't see people saying, oh, I don't know the names of any reporters because I don't watch general news, but you don't see people talking about, this reporter's got a better scoop than this reporter and things like that when it comes to, politics and things like that. But you get it in sports quite a lot. And in the NBA, you got guys like, well, you have two people who pretty much know everything in the NBA, and you have similar in the NFL and these things. But it is interesting. And so I think that a part of it is a lot of people competing for views, for the job, for this, and it leads to an industry where a lot of things happen, and a lot of stuff gets written just for the sake of filling column space and for all of that. It's very easy for someone to take something that's out there, ask someone they know, and then present it as their own information if they think that it's true. It's one of the reasons I did this in the first place on the Muppetier side of it. What got interested and why it took off in terms of growing as an independent sort of media channel was, there's a lot of stuff out there that isn't true that just gets spread around. And there's a lot of stuff that actually is, that goes well under the radar and then gets recycled and changed and all of that. And it's hard to get people to understand that something doesn't become true just because it's now been reported by, Bloomberg. Something doesn't become true just because now it's been reported by Telegraph or the Times. And I'm not picking on those two in particular at all. When this whole takeover started, well before it, you and I had spent months speaking about it. Little tidbits here and there. And the New York Times wrote an article saying that Manchester United was not for sale.
Oh, man.
They wrote an article that Manchester United was not for sale, that the rumors were false, that it was not true, that all of that.
It was all because of an Elon Musk tweet.
Oh, yeah. That was why.
The arrogance of that.
It was crazy. Meanwhile, I know. Meanwhile, people will know we have contact, around Ineos in place where Jim Ratcliffe's been working on a sale for 2 years, way before all of this. He's been in contact with the Glazers for ages on this. And
I mean, either we're clairvoyant, or we have some legitimate contacts.
And there was no retraction. Yeah, no retraction, no correction, none of that. And that was the New York Times, and it wasn't not true until and this isn't picking on him at all in the slightest, because he got the official story on this. It wasn't not true before Mark Kleiman at Sky published his story that United were set to be open for offers. It wasn't not true before that. It was true.
Yeah,
whether or not something comes out in legacy media, or however it comes out in legacy media, actually has very little to do with whether it's true or false. There are so many things that are unpublished that are true, and so many things that are published that are not. And so it is, it is appreciated, people who follow and listen to all of this, because it's a challenge. You'll get a lot of heat from people for things you say that they want to contest, and you get a very little credit for the things you say that eventually come to pass. Not really, but that eventually get reported on or pulled or anything like that. It's a funny time.
Those will say you're full of shit, and when it's found out they're not, they never retract it. And that's just part of the game. I don't care. So let's elucidate a little bit on this takeover, because as we were saying, that Jim Ratcliffe refining his offer, and as we had said that a couple of weeks ago, that there was some dispute over how that was going to be formulated, and how Glazers were going to continue to have some sphere of influence over Manchester United. Something, of course, Jim Ratcliffe was anathema to him. He did not want to do that. I understand that why. There's been some suggestion that the start of the season has changed the appetite of buyers to increase. I don't think that's true. I think those types of metrics aren't really, you lose a couple of games doesn't really affect the sale price of the club, because that's something that can be easily rectified once you buy it. But I think where it would have some legs is if it started to affect the Glazers' income to where it would increase their desperation to sell. And if buyers sense desperation from a seller, then they don't have the incentive to increase. The other aspect is, could it provoke the Qataris to increase their bid? There's some suggestions that also could be the case, that they may be at a point of acknowledging that without increasing, they don't get it. These are ifs, ands, buts, and maybes, of course. But something that Ben Jacobs wrote that we also mentioned on this was that both parties were operating on the premise that they were preferred bidder. When we were saying that that's what Ineos were operating on, I couldn't say that was what the Qataris were saying, but so that was definitely what they were assuming was the case. So there seems to be a confidence on at least the Ineos side that they can get a deal done here.
Yeah. And, it was, as I was saying, that, Jim Ratcliffe, I know, thinks that this is the time now. See, the summer is over, the window is over. There's really no interruptions between now and the end of the season to get something done. There's no reason, if the club is going to be sold, there's really no justification for it not to happen in the ensuing months. And it seems like the right time to push it through. And the thing you can take away from this is that they were having discussions. There were conversations occurring between people around Ineos, Rain Group, and Glazers on all of this. And the follow-up to that is that they're going to refine, as was used, their offer for the club. Now, the thing that I understand about this is that doesn't mean more money necessarily, or raising the bid, but changing the structure. And this speaks to the point we were making before, that and it is why I think there's probably some confidence there, because if you can put the puzzle pieces together a bit, if you're having conversations over the nature of things like voting rights and all of that, those are somewhat advanced discussions in something like this. They're fairly advanced. You consider them far along. If following these conversations, you're going to refine your bid, you likely have an expectation of knowing what the other party wants at that point in time. Because unlike the blind bids that were put in, in February or March, April, and May, which were essentially blind bids, if you think about it, that's almost like a silent auction, right? Which is what the Glazers were going for, in hopes that the money would keep going up, 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 up as high as it can go. Once you enter into those direct conversations, usually you know what the other party wants. And if following those conversations, you're ready to put in a new offer, you can piece together that person probably has some confidence that it will get a deal done. And that is sort of the
Yeah, that
confidence
sounds
that
like broad
Ineos
agreement
would
to
have.
me.
Yeah. And
that sounds like broad agreement to me. It sounds like fine-tuning a bid to where, because first of all, if we're talking about voting rights for Joel and Avram, it sounds to me like there's a broad agreement with the other four on what that buyout price is. So it would appear that there's the broad agreement with the six siblings on what it will eventually be sold for. But of course, what exactly does the two remaining Glazers who will still have some share options on United, what exactly does that entitle them to? So it sounds to me like there's a broad agreement pretty much on most stuff. Otherwise, there would be no point in progressing to that point if there was no agreement on the other aspects. If you can't find an agreement on the acquisition cost, what's the point of talking about the finer details of how would we remain after the acquisition goes through? There's no point in doing that. So that in itself is encouraging. And of course, there are those that think that this is unacceptable, that the Glazers will remain, that Joel and Avram will remain. I'm not one of those. In an ideal world, I wish Jim would get rid of the ball completely. But if they're impotent, they have no say on how United are run, and they're completely peripheral, I really don't care, to be honest. Yes, I want them to go on, but I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good, as they say.
Yeah, well, and that's the point. I was trying to make that point to people, I think all the way back in May, was that, look, don't sit here protesting against a Jim Ratcliffe bid that removes the Glazers from control, because the alternative could be they don't leave at all and they remain entirely in control.
Yeah, and by the way,
we're 5 months later, and that's the case.
That does not make you or anyone pro-Glazer, by the way.
No,
that does not make you or anyone pro-Glazer, by the way.
It's the opposite.
It's binary nonsense. Yeah, I know. No, I know.
It's like whatever it takes. It's kind of like the ends justify the means. Is how I feel about that. If the end result is the Glazers out of control, I don't care what it takes or how it happens to get there. That's sort of the point. It's quite different.
I know Twitter isn't known for its nuanced and respect views on information or any topic for that matter. But I put a tweet out the other day saying, if you wanted to learn more about what Bloomberg were talking about, you could watch it here on our podcast. And I'm paraphrasing here, but somebody tweeted back, yeah, why would I watch that pro-Glazer, anti-Qatari racist nonsense? I wanted to respond, and I thought better of it, and I thought, well, why? And I'm going, how truly insane is it that reporting on what Jim Ratcliffe is doing is considered prejudice by someone? I mean, this is an illness. This is insanity. Yeah. And do you really think that? People really think that if the Qataris were putting the bid together on exactly the same premise, I'd report it in exactly the same way, and it wouldn't be motivated out of prejudice towards Jim Ratcliffe. Yeah. This is totally insane. Yeah. And I can't, so frustrating sometimes to read that stuff, and I don't even know I give it oxygen, but anyway. Let me talk about Antony, because it looks like Antony's back in the UK, talking to police as Gabriella Cavalin, I believe her name is. Apologies if I've said that wrong. Where he is expected to surrender his phone, and there's a lot of confidence on his side and legal side that they'll be able to address these allegations and be able to move on. Do you know anything about this?
No, I mean, obviously, when you consider how these things usually go, unfortunately, I say unfortunately without leaning in one direction or the other. Unfortunately, these things tend to then take quite a bit more time than you'd hope they would when they start digging into all of this, because either way, innocent, guilty, however you would hope, it's not something that drags on for long periods of time. But unfortunately, as we saw with Mason Greenwood, it took a long time for them to even bring charges in the first place, despite everything that they had. It took a long, long time. And then it took a long time after that. And unfortunately, either way, whether Antony is innocent, unfortunately for him, or if he's not, unfortunately for the victim or alleged victim in this case, it's not likely to have resolution anytime soon, unfortunately. So
I wonder, do you think?
Yeah, go
Do you
ahead.
think United will leave him on this leave of absence until the investigation is complete, or do you think that after he meets with the police, they would feel confident bringing him back?
I don't think they can. I think the way that it's laid out, the way that it's viewed, until there's something that leans it one way or another, they're going to have to stick with him being suspended.
Well, I think if
not suspended, but
away. If you look at the statement, James, I thought United chose their words very carefully, and one of the things that they had said was to let him stay in Brazil to address some of these allegations. It wasn't to say, we'll wait until the investigation is complete. Right. It wasn't, so United may feel confident after he's met with the police to say, okay, we'll let the investigation play out, but, we're comfortable bringing him back. I understand that it's difficult now because, once you give him the leave of absence, which people will not make a distinction between leave of absence and suspension. Yep. Once you bring him back, it's almost an endorsement in his innocence in some sense.
Yeah.
But people feel people have their own views on that. But I wonder what United will do in this situation, if they will bring him back, given that
I think the issue with him being publicly investigated by the Greater Manchester Police is a problem while that's ongoing, because it's going to be being in the news constantly because it's not private. We kind of talked about the oddness of the whole distinctions between the private and not private way of things, but it's going to be in the news pretty regularly while he's being investigated by the Greater Manchester Police Department, and I think that it's going to be hard for them to do that while that's ongoing. You bring him into a match day squad and an article comes out that morning that he's been questioned the day before by police. I just don't think they're going to want the optics on that, honestly. I don't think they will.
It's not easy. I get it. Yeah. All right. Looks like Ten Hag discussions. I haven't looked into this in great detail, but I think it was probably a good thing for him that these things have come out before we get to Jadon Sancho. We'll talk about Ten Hag possibly getting a new deal. I said this even when in the midst of his bad run, United couldn't afford to sack him anyway. They could not afford another rebuild under a different manager. It would reflect awful on the club. He's not above criticism. He hasn't been perfect. But to me, I think he is the most impressive manager I've seen at United since Ferguson.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because even if you have criticisms of him, is there a better plan out there? Can you think of a manager at this point that you could say, oh yeah, we'll just replace him with this and that's going to solve this problem that we're having? I don't think so. I don't think that's the case.
I don't think the feelings at United or Ten Hag. Look, I'm not saying that he's not above criticism or he's been perfect. No, nobody's perfect. Nobody's above criticism. And I think if you're objective, you're honest, you would have to say that there's been things he's done wrong inevitably. But I still think United's feelings supersede him, which is obvious. They transcend any manager. And for him to have the best chance of being successful, still United need to make structural, fundamental changes.
Yes.
And then you can properly evaluate him and say, okay, But I think, given everything that he's working with, I think he's done a really good job so far.
Yeah, and I think that this season, we were talking about last week when things were a bit more negative. I was saying let's see how we get on by November, and even when you get these kind of contract rumors that first crop up, usually they take 6 to 9 months to actually get done, and you get that kind of evaluation period. I remember with Solskjaer and with Jose, who amusingly both got sacked right after getting their new contracts, of course, but. The rumors have popped up earlier in the season. They go on to have a successful year, and then the new contract comes in, and then things go to crap. But
that's a good point.
I think that there's exactly. It's like a pattern. Like, maybe don't give them a new contract because we see what happens when you give managers at United a new contract, and what I don't know what the hell goes on there. So maybe don't, but I expect that it'll be something under discussion, probably with the time it'll take. we'll have clarity on takeover by then, which is obviously going to change things. Will they get rid of the manager? Absolutely not. I think that's one of the positions that you would see with the most security when you have a takeover, because they're going to build from the top down, not the bottom up. And in a lot of ways, the manager is not at the top when you're talking about corporate structures, when you're talking about like an actual club itself. The manager you want to keep in charge because they're going to encapsulate the football side of things and keep things flowing while there might be a little bit of chaos in other areas, which is just natural in a change of business. You'll see them appoint a new CEO. They're probably going to then look to appoint a new director of football, and then they'll start building down from there. But they're going to want the manager to have the backing and the stability during that time. And so I think it's likely either way. You know, Erik ten Hag's here to stay for quite a while.
And I hope he is. Jadon Sancho, my friend, let's evolve the conversation now, because obviously this is a story that has constant updates. On the PlayStation, until Xbox, I don't know, not done with the kids, so I don't know which device it was on. One of these games consoles, he was up till 3 a.m. Looks like he was playing FIFA. An issue that Borussia Dortmund had complained about before, that he was up on games consoles, which is part of the reason why he was consistently late for training. It would appear, based on some of the coverage, that senior players have told him to apologize. And I'm looking at this and going, there's a young man that's setting fire to his career over his refusal to give an apology. And even if you think you're right, there's no question the best thing for Jadon Sancho to do is to give an apology. He's behaving like someone who's already been tapped up and is confident he's getting a move in January, no matter what he does. But my advice, if I was Jadon Sancho's representative, I'd be saying, right now, this is the most important moment of your career, because what happens over the next 3 to 4 months determines where you move, determines whether you get a move to a top club or whether you get a move to a club where this type of thing is tolerated. Sancho isn't exactly coming off exceptional form. Sancho hasn't had any moment during his United career where he's lived up to his potential. People have to go back 3 years to remember Jadon Sancho of the very highest level. He's been kicked out of the England team. He's been kicked out of United. He's had problems with Dortmund. And you'd imagine that anyone who's going to spend serious money on Jadon Sancho would do their homework and see that this has been a consistent problem. He has to prove Erik ten Hag wrong, and right now he's proven Erik ten Hag right. And it's tragic because ultimately I think it's a terrible betrayal of the fans who deserve better, who really have backed him 100%. If Sancho would have been out of Real Madrid, he'd have had the white hankies out 2.5 years ago, right? If Sancho would have been any other top club, right, he'd have been getting pelters, right? He's lucky. He's at United. So for me, this is a kid setting fire to his career when he's so young. And if I'm a top manager and someone, my sporting director says, what about Jadon Sancho? Do we need that in our dressing room?
Yeah. And it is difficult because, in the start of the situation, I definitely have some empathy for it, because you can have critique on perhaps his point of, Antony and what's going on there and favoritism and things. You could even, I'm not even saying that a manager can't have favorites. That's the thing. I think I said
every manager has
they
favorites.
all do. And it's like,
every parent has favorites.
It's unfair, but you deal with it, right? It's unfair, but you deal with it. And I think the longer it goes on, the worse it looks for Sancho, and the better it looks for Erik ten Hag. And that's why it was better that he would have just put it to bed. When you look at the situation, Facundo Pellistri gets a start. Gets 2 starts. He gets a start at Bayern in Champions League. That game was made for Jadon Sancho. He's had
do you want to play PlayStation or do you want to play for Man United? Pick one, son.
And Hannibal Mejbri's look at the kids who are getting chances here, because they weren't too proud. And I know they were unhappy. I know for a fact Facundo Pellistri was unhappy with his situation at United.
Yeah, of course.
But it's what you do with these things, right? It's not how you feel, but how you act on those feelings that always makes a difference, right? How you deal with them. I think it was Lowry who said that Hannibal Mejbri was upset and almost left because of these things.
Yeah, well, he wasn't on
not
the
go
bench in the
down.
Forest game. Really
Yeah,
upset.
right. That was the one. He was real upset by that. Dan Gore made the bench. He didn't make the bench. He wasn't there. But look now, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, what kind of attitude he must have shown behind the scenes
Yeah.
to now be getting starts. It's like
Correct.
to have really nailed a place where he's going to be in this team moving forward. And it's tough. Life isn't easy, and there's wrongs from United, but it's like, the longer it goes, the worse it looks. That's all.
Yeah, no, Jadon Sancho may have some legitimate grapes. It's not the point, right? Yeah. The point is that what's best for his career, and it's not playing PlayStation. I mean, he could be playing against Bayern Munich, right, and putting himself in a shop window, right? Where big clubs, you go, hold on, this kid's got something special here. It's just often an issue with United and Ten Hag, but what Ten Hag is asking of him is exactly what any top manager is going to ask from him. You need to be on time, right? Yeah. If Arteta got rid of Aubameyang for the same thing, right? Showing up constantly late to team meetings. You have to get that out of your football club. And if you tolerate Aubameyang, it will spread right throughout, right? So Ten Hag is consistently shown with Ronaldo, it doesn't matter who you are. You break his rules, you're out. Marcus Rashford before the Wolves game on fire. Dropped for not being on time. So what happened to Jadon Sancho has happened to bigger and better players than him.
Yeah.
So there is no excuse to say, let me show up consistently to training late and then drop me. There's no argument to make for it, right? Now, he could argue other players have gotten away with things, and possibly that's true, right? But the way it works, James, always is exceptions are made for players that deliver on the pitch. Right, Eric Cantona got away with more at Manchester United than anybody, right? But that's because when he went on the pitch on a Saturday, he was exceptional. But when you aren't doing it on the pitch on a Saturday, there's no motivation to cut you that slack. There's no, there's no dividend. What am I? You got to give me something. It's got to, and if you're going to show up late to training and not perform on a Saturday, then I'm entitled to ask you to show up on time for training. And also remember, Eric Cantona was one of the first people when he came to United to train in the afternoon. I remember United players at the time going, they were program minded. They go out and train in the morning, go home. And it's like, no. In France, we train in the morning and then we train in the afternoon. Completely changed the training methods and their professionalism. So Sancho needs to improve his professionalism, in my opinion. All right. Quickly, let's look at the Palace game this weekend. Reguilon should be back. McTominay, Eriksen should be back. Martinez still has some soreness in his foot, so he's a doubt. Varane is back. Mainoo and Amad are expected back after the international break. Will be a different game this weekend. Bizarrely, Palace rotated on Tuesday. If you're finishing mid-table and you're not in the Champions League, Europa League, why are you rotating?
It's a little odd, isn't it? I mean, you got to give a lot of chances to young players. That's how some of those clubs make it,
but it was largely fringe players. I mean, I get it. Look, I totally understand that. But Palace will come out, will play better. But United also will have a stronger team.
Yep, they will. They will. I think you'll see. Yeah. You obviously, the biggest changes you're going to see are in the front line. Marcus Rashford and Rasmus Højlund are going to start in place of Antony, Martial, and Garnacho. Not that they were bad, though, but, you certainly get a different dynamic. Bruno Fernandes will start in place of Hannibal Mejbri, for sure. Otherwise, you might see the same team. I think those are the main changes, those three. And then you have to make that decision on the right. I think one of the biggest decisions that's going to have to be made here is with Amrabat, Mount, and that right wing position.
Yeah.
It's tough. I don't think that game happens. Amrabat was very good, but that was Mason Mount's best game. Not that he's had a lot for United yet, but that was by far his best game. He was fantastic. His movement, energy, everything he did in the midfield is exactly why Erik ten Hag would want him. Do you move him now to the right to push Amrabat into the midfield? I don't know that that's the right call. I don't know that that's the right thing. And I know for me that I don't like when they move Bruno Fernandes out of the midfield. I know that. When he plays, I don't like when he gets moved out of the midfield. So I think that's going to be one of the things. At the same time, I will say this because I know people really, really want to see a lot of Amrabat. Some of it's a new toy. Some of it's because he's a great, passionate player who you like his attitude. You want to see him play. I don't know that it's the smartest idea to start your only 4 healthy senior midfielders in the same game and say that that's how we're going to play from now on, given the injury crisis that we've had, right? Amrabat, Casemiro, Mount, Bruno, you're going to need to ride heavy on those 4 players for the rest of the season. We've seen that is going to be the case. You cannot be having to play all 4 all the time and having them get injured. Mount's coming off injury. Amrabat's coming off injury. Bruno and Casemiro never get injured, but whatever. You still don't want to have to ride those 4. And so I think that's the challenge. As much as everybody wants to see it, Erik ten Hag's going to have to figure out a way to not have to play all 4 of them and solve that right wing position at the same time. And that's the biggest thing. I'm interested to see what he does.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Hopefully, they get another win, clean sheet, and build momentum. It's feeling good right now. It's been a good week. We will see what happens. Don't forget, folks, give us a follow at Muppetiers and Muppetiers. Make sure you subscribe to all his content platforms. You've got a Discord platform too, don't you?
Yeah. And the link's all on Twitter or X or whatever. I've got the link tree. You can join up and follow everything there. The Discord's great, very busy, very chaotic, but a lot of fun. A lot of people talking in there.
Okay. Yes, folks, go ahead if you're on the BTP side, give this guy a follow. Thanks to all of you for all your downloads, retweets, likes, all your follows, everything else. Much, much appreciated. We will begin doing these shows live in the very near future. Yep. And we'll add a segment for questions and all that there. So expect that really soon. So thanks to each and every one of you. I hope you're doing well. And the next time we talk to you, hopefully United have another win. Did the United play next week? In midweek?
Yeah, it must be the Galatasaray, right?
Is it Galatasaray? Okay,
yeah.
So Galatasaray midweek. So hopefully by the time we talk to you, there's another 2 wins. United will need to win that Galatasaray.
Yeah, they need that one. All
right, folks, take it easy. See you later, mate. Bye.